If you think the United States has the world's most powerful intelligence agency, you're wrong. Today, I'm going to tell you about a mind-blowing intelligence operation that surpasses human imagination and logic. The story we're discussing today involves a spy who sacrificed everything she had and carried out her mission for 20 years. The hero of today's story is the Chinese intelligence agency, which managed to outwit the entire French intelligence service and infiltrate the life of a French official for 2 decades. This operation led to the leakage of classified information that ultimately changed the course of the world as we know it. For those of you seeing me for the first time, I talk about everything strange and mysterious on our planet Earth. And as usual, before we dive in, let's remember that nothing lasts forever. Today, we'll uncover one of the greatest intelligence deceptions in history, orchestrated by China in France. While we usually talk about mysterious events from Earth, today's story feels like it's straight out of Mars. Don't forget to show your support with a like, and let's always discuss and share our opinions in the comments. Our story begins in 1964, during the tense atmosphere of the Cold War. At that time, the entire world was on edge, anxiously anticipating the possibility of a devastating nuclear war. Beijing was a closed-off city under the rule of China's Communist Party. It was practically isolated from the rest of the world. There was little interaction and even fewer international visits to or from China. Then, French President Charles de Gaulle decided to break China's isolation and officially recognized it. He declared, "I recognize the People's Republic of China." France became the first major Western nation to establish full diplomatic relations with Beijing. This decision sent shockwaves through France's allied nations. France was part of the Western Bloc, aligned with the United States, Britain, Australia, and Japan. So, for France to suddenly forge ties with a country in the Eastern Bloc, China, which was opposed to them, was unusual and raised significant questions about the nature of this relationship. What could a superpower like France gain from forming an alliance with China, a country striving to become a superpower itself? Critics argued that France was risking its global standing with this move, but France ignored the backlash and continued to build its relationship with China. As a result, the French embassy was established in Beijing in 1964. The embassy hosted numerous cultural and social events, bringing together diplomats, officials, and prominent figures from both nations. It was at one of these events that our chilling story begins. From this gathering, the greatest emotional intelligence deception in the history of the Cold War was born. Pay attention to the word emotional, because what we're about to discuss will exceed all your expectations. At this event, a relationship developed between Bernard Boursicot, the secretary of the French embassy in Beijing, and a Chinese opera singer named Xu Peipu. Bernard's full name was Bernard Boursicot, and I promise you this, no matter how wild your imagination runs, you'll never guess the ending of this story. What's the most twisted thing your mind can conceive? What could this incredible deception involve? This story doesn't include nuclear weapons or spies in suits. It's a tale of hearts, emotions, deceit, and lies that surpass anything imaginable. To set the scene, let's understand what was happening globally in the mid-1960s. The Cold War was like a volcano threatening to erupt at any moment. The world was literally split between 2 blocks. The United States and its allies on one side, and the Soviet Union and China on the other. Each bloc sought dominance and control without engaging in direct warfare. No planes, no tanks, no soldiers. So, how did they fight each other? Through something called proxy wars and intelligence operations. During this era, nations were willing to do anything to gather information about their adversaries. Intelligence agencies spared no means, no matter how unconventional, including exploiting emotions to gather intel. Every side sought to know what the other was thinking and planning. This is where China particularly stood out. It was known for employing highly innovative methods of espionage. And to become a superpower, what do you think they'd do? Exactly what you're thinking. They had to engage in the spy wars. On the other side of this story, we have France. France, too, was emerging from World War II, with its economy devastated and its infrastructure heavily damaged. At that time, France was in the process of rebuilding. They faced enormous challenges, both economically and structurally. Globally, France was trying to re-establish its position while also entering the game of espionage and intelligence gathering. This brings us to the French embassy in Beijing. As mentioned earlier, the embassy held frequent events, such as receptions and parties, attended by diplomats, officials, and prominent figures from both nations. Bernard, the central figure of our story, worked at the French embassy in China as a secretary. His role involved overseeing administrative affairs and diplomatic operations. Essentially, he was part of the embassy's core staff. Bernard's responsibilities included managing administrative tasks, coordinating activities between the embassy and French government offices, and preparing reports and analyses. He also gathered information about China's political developments and international relations, which he would send back to the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The most significant and dangerous part of Bernard's job was that he worked under high-ranking diplomats. This meant he had access to high-level meetings where critical and confidential discussions took place. These meetings often revealed sensitive information, such as France's plans for its relationship with China. As part of his duties, Bernard acted as France's eyes on the ground, observing and listening to what was happening in Chinese society. He paid attention to rumors about the Communist Party, gauged public sentiment about the government, and even gathered insights on daily life in China. For instance, he investigated whether there were shortages or increased demand for certain goods, and he monitored transportation, ports, and railways, anything that could provide clues about China's economic activities. Essentially, Bernard was an undercover informant, but one wearing a suit, driving a car, and appearing professional. In 1964, during one of the embassy's receptions in Beijing, Bernard's focus shifted entirely to one person, a Chinese opera singer named Xu Peipu. She is the second protagonist in our story. The moment Bernard saw her, he was captivated. Her calm demeanor and beauty were unlike anything he had seen before. According to Bernard, it took only one look for him to realize he needed to talk to her and do everything in his power to establish some kind of connection with her. This poor man had no idea that this encounter would completely change his life forever. Shi Peipu, or let's just call her Shi, enchanted Bernard with her beauty and operatic voice. At that moment, Bernard decided he had to approach her and start a conversation. Just as Bernard expected, the more they talked, the more he found himself captivated by her. Shi, however, wasn't just beautiful. She spoke to him in a way that was full of mystery and confidence. This mysterious charm intrigued Bernard in a very strange way. They agreed they should meet and talk more frequently. Of course, the first thought that comes to your mind is, Shi is the spy. That's it. Case closed. Roll credits. But hold on. The story has just begun. As you may have guessed, Shi was indeed part of a grand Chinese intelligence strategy. She was one of a network of highly trained spies tasked with gathering sensitive information about Western diplomats and politicians. Another part of her mission was to recruit new agents for the Chinese intelligence agency. Love and desire became the easiest and most effective tool. This is where the Chinese intelligence agency, symbolized as MMS, found its way into the French embassy through Shi. They capitalized on Bernard's growing admiration for Shi. She began meeting him regularly, strengthening their relationship. Their encounters evolved from casual and formal conversations into something much deeper and more complicated. Initially, they exchanged small gifts, which later developed into mutual affection. Eventually, love entered the picture, and with love came a romantic relationship between Bernard and Shi. About a year later, in 1965, Shi told to Bernard that she was pregnant with his child. According to sources, the child was named either Shi Dudu or Bertrand. This revelation transformed their relationship from a simple romantic affair into one with familial ties, a family bond that Bernard had long been searching for. This made Bernard an easy target for gathering secrets and information to serve China. Despite their relationship appearing natural and genuine, Shi's pregnancy shifted their dynamic to an entirely new level. Bernard, as a diplomat, already had a busy schedule filled with meetings, conferences, and travel, while Shi, who claimed to be pregnant, became increasingly tied up herself. Bernard began confiding in her about his personal and professional struggles. To Bernard, Shi was the only person he trusted. She became his emotional sanctuary in the strange and isolating world he lived in. According to Bernard, they would meet in the dark. Let me share something Bernard himself said. The darkness where we used to meet made me feel safe, as if it isolated me from the world of espionage and politics. It allowed me to experience genuine moments of emotion. What poor Bernard didn't know was that the darkness Shi insisted on wasn't random. It wasn't a coincidence that all their meetings happened in the dark. That darkness hid secrets far bigger than he could have imagined. The darkness was intentional, a calculated part of a larger scheme orchestrated by the Chinese intelligence agency. They employed a drip-feeding strategy to ensure Bernard wouldn't suspect anything or sense that something was wrong. The plan was carried out in stages. At first, Shi portrayed herself as a curious and loving partner. She would ask questions and show interest in the details of Bernard's life. She inquired about everything, from his personal life to his work, but in a way that seemed routine and natural for any couple in a relationship. How was your day at work? How do you feel about living in China? Do you feel safe here, being such an important diplomat? These were basic, seemingly innocent questions, nothing that would raise suspicion. Instead, they made Bernard feel like she genuinely cared about his day and the details of his life. These kinds of questions built a subtle sense of trust between them, making him feel comfortable enough to share more over time. Additionally, Shi employed another psychological tactic. She would appear and disappear from Bernard's life. Their relationship was never one of constant, consistent communication. This made Bernard even more attached to her, as her absence would create a sense of longing. At the same time, this worked in her favor and aligned perfectly with the Chinese intelligence agency's goals. Poor Bernard believed this relationship was healthy, with each of them having their own life in space. Or, let's say, he was clever in his own way. He enjoyed the arrangement because it suited his interest too. After all, Bernard was also a spy and needed time to focus on his work. But the truth was, he missed her more than he realized. He often asked to see her, but she would apologize and refuse, always telling him that her pregnancy symptoms were very difficult and that her health didn't allow her to visit him. She would say she didn't expect him to come to her either, as she understood the demands of his position and his limited time. She'd often tell him, "I know how precious your time is and how important your work is, so I won't pressure you to come to me." After some time, Shi gave birth to their first child, Master Shi Dodo. She came to Bernard with the baby and said, "This is your son. But before you say anything, if you don't want to acknowledge him, that's fine. From the moment I entered this relationship with you, I understood your situation as a diplomat and a politician, so don't feel pressured." However, Bernard saw the child as a permanent bond of their love. He told her how much he appreciated her being so understanding. I know we don't see each other often because of my work. I know how hard pregnancy is for any woman, and I know you went through it alone without me by your side. But I love you so much, and I can't imagine my life without you. He acknowledged the baby as his son, and from that moment, a new chapter in their relationship began. In their relationship, Bernard's position as a diplomat with an important role gave him access to classified files as part of his work. These files included information about the nature of Sino-French relations and Western policies toward China. Of course, this was precisely the type of information the Chinese intelligence agency was after. Bernard would share details with Shi, opening up to her, unaware that he was leaking sensitive information. To him, he was simply talking to his lover and the mother of his child. After several years of their relationship, with Shu deeply embedded in all aspects of his life, the Chinese intelligence agency began asking her for more specific and sensitive information. Now they wanted critical details. Shu's questions started to change. She began asking more about meetings and their objectives. She started probing for more detailed information than before, discussing French policies toward China and asking about France's stance on developments in Asia, including its position on China's nuclear program. She also inquired about the secret meetings at the French embassy. Bernard, without a second thought, provided this highly sensitive information, unknowingly handing over critical secrets on a silver platter to Chinese intelligence. For example, one of the leaks Shi managed to obtain revealed that France was monitoring China's nuclear development, trying to assess whether China intended to become a global superpower. Bernard even disclosed that France was struggling to define its relationship with China, unsure whether to consider it an ally or a rival. Through Shi, Chinese intelligence uncovered France's double standards, realizing that France was deceptive, saying one thing while doing the opposite. Armed with this information, China strategically manipulated the situation. They deliberately leaked information to Bernard, portraying China as weak and deeply fond of France. In meetings and encounters, they planted individuals to speak in front of Bernard, emphasizing that China was harmless, loved France, and had no plans against it. They even downplayed their nuclear program, portraying it as small and insignificant, posing no threat to anyone, including France. This strategy worked. France became more trusting of China and began exporting civilian nuclear technology to them, contributing to the advancement of China's nuclear energy program. Essentially, the Chinese intelligence agency outsmarted France, knowing its duplicity and leveraging it to their advantage. Shi continued to extract information from Bernard, particularly about meetings at the French embassy between French and Western officials. They learned that France planned to expand its trade presence in Asia. In response, China flooded the Asian market with goods at prices lower than French products, undermining French trade efforts. This demonstrates how valuable the information Shi obtained was, and how effectively the Chinese intelligence agency exploited it. China's trade strategy was built on intelligence gained from Bernard's disclosures. At that point, a new character entered the story, a man named Kang Sheng, who requested an urgent and secret meeting with Bernard. When they met, Kang informed Bernard that Shi's life, as well as their son's, was in danger because of her relationship with Bernard. He explained that certain factions within the Communist Party had noticed Shi's connection to foreign individuals, namely Bernard, and this had made her suspicious in the party's eyes. Kang told Bernard that if Shi did not cooperate with the party and provide them with the information they needed from him, her life and that of their son could be at serious risk. Kang reassured Bernard, saying, "You are the only one who can save them.